Hello, this is Jenny at Designs with Paper. Thank you so much for stopping by my special edition video on Worldwide Card Making Day. That's right, today is Worldwide Card Making Day, and I am going to take this card sketch and create 3 different cards. I found this card sketch in a Facebook group that I will link below, and I am going to take it and use it to make 3 somewhat different versions of the same card. The first card will be a very clean and simple, completely one layer, no extra fluff added card. This is a piece of watercolor paper that is 4 1/4 inches wide by 11 inches tall, and I will score it in the middle at 5 1/2. That will make a top fold portrait style card, my favorite. I am not going to fold it just yet. I just needed to know where the center of or the top of my card would be, so I could align my stamps correctly. Now, that card sketch had the card base, a vertical rectangle, a square, and a horizontal rectangle. And I am going to achieve those layers with just images in this first card. So for the vertical rectangle, I will be using this dandelion stamp from this Hero Arts stamp set. And I am going to stamp it right here over to the left-hand side of my card. And because I want to add some watercolor technique to it, I will be using a waterproof ink. The ink I will be using is the Archival Watering Can, I think is the color name. And I will stamp this 2 times on my watercolor paper. We know that when we are stamping on watercolor paper, you do have to stamp more than 1 time to get a crisp, clean image because of the texture of the watercolor paper. I apologize for my gravelly voice. Grass pollen is in the air where I live, and my allergies have kicked into high gear, and I sound a little bit weird. I apologize for that. This is the first stamping. You can see that it's not a very clear image, but I will go ahead and stamp it again, and I get a much, much better image, much crisper, clearer image. I am using my cloth to just kind of smooth my hand over the front of that MISTI, and it works perfect. So here we go. We are going to go ahead and start with the square version. And I've pulled out the stamp block. It's about 1 1/2 inches square. And then I changed my mind. I decided I wanted to use this little one. I think this is about 1 inch square stamp block. And this Stampin' Up! Ink pad. I am going to do a little bit of watercolor stamping with my stamp block and this water sprayer. What is that thing called? Water bottle. There we go. A spray bottle. Words have left my mind. I'm just going to mash this stamp block down into the ink pad and then add some water to it. I probably could have added a little bit more water to get the result I was looking for, but that's okay. I got the result I wanted in the end. I am going to put this stamp block down on my watercolor paper and just let it kind of absorb the water for a minute and pull it back up. And this is where I've decided, not quite enough water. I am adding a little bit with my spray bottle. Probably I should have just used a wet paintbrush because it did bleed outside its edges, which required me to make the square a little bit larger than I intended with that stamp block. So it really is a good thing that I went with the smaller block to start with. I have dried this and with my heat tool, and the bottom edge is just not very smooth. So I'm adding some water, and I will pull out my ink pad. And the really cool thing about Stampin' Up's ink pads are the lid. You can mush it together in the middle, and that lid kind of becomes a palette. So I have added a little bit of water to the cardstock, or the watercolor paper, and some water to my brush. And I am picking up that ink off the lid and just kind of filling out the bottom edge of that square. And I'm going to heat set it with my heat tool so that I can move on to the next part of this card. So the sketch had a vertical rectangle, a square, and a horizontal rectangle. And in order to make that horizontal rectangle, I will be using a sentiment. And I'm using a sentiment from the same stamp set. But I decided when I got this dried off that I didn't really love the gray ink. So I have decided to go ahead and put that stamp back in my stamp positioner and stamp it again and heat emboss it. And I am going to lean way over that. You can see my head in the camera there. And I'm just going to make sure that I've lined that stamp up just as perfect as I can get it. And I will put my anti-static powder bag down on the front of the card to make sure that the embossing powder doesn't stick to anything but the ink. And I am going to ink up that stamp with Versamark ink. This is a very sticky, clear ink that stays wet for a long time so that the embossing powder can stick to it. I will stamp this image 2 times, and I've decided to use the Simon Says Stamp Rose Gold embossing powder. Now, embossing powder lasts literally forever. And I think I've purchased this rose gold color like twice, maybe 3 times. This might be my 3rd jar. I just love this color. I'm going to go ahead and clean up the edges with this fluffy brush. Make sure that I don't have any scraggly or extra pieces of embossing powder on the card front before I go ahead and heat set it. I know that you can sometimes pick those pieces off with a craft pick or an eraser, but I didn't want to put a ding in my card since it's a 1-layer card. And I'm just going to go ahead and heat that up and melt that embossing powder and get that nice shiny finish. I wish it showed up better on camera. Now I am going to use the sentiment for that horizontal rectangle. And I am going to stamp it with Versamark ink as well and heat emboss it with the same rose gold embossing powder. I did stamp that 2 times as well. And when you are stamping a font, when I am stamping a font, I don't use a lot of pressure. I would rather stamp it more than 1 time and use light pressure and not have the stamp mush out and have the edges of the letters get all weird. And this is a really pretty font. It says, "May all your wishes come true," which is, of course, perfect with the dandelion, right? And I'm going to use that same embossing powder. I did forget to go back over this image with my anti-static powder bag, but I don't think I had, there wasn't hardly anything that was extra. And what did kind of stick extra, I can brush off with that fluffy brush really easily. And I'm going to go ahead and put the powder, back into that container and heat set the sentiment as well. And I think that heat embossing is one of the things that just kind of sucks us into this craft of ours. It is kind of like magic. And I'm going to fold this card base in half and burnish that down with my bone folder. It is a little bit warped from the heat drying and the embossing, so I will stick it underneath something heavy to flatten it out for a little bit. And there we go. Card 1 is finished, and we are going to move on to card number 2. Card number 2 could also be classified as a clean and simple card, even though it has 2 layers. This is a piece of Neenah Solar White Classic Crest 80-pound cardstock. It is cut at 4 inches wide by 5 1/4 inches tall, and I will be stamping this tree. This is a Stampin' Up! I think it's Lovely as a Tree. It is one of my oldest, one of their oldest, still in circulation. I think it's still in circulation, stamp sets. It is just an all-around, use it for any season, any type of card you can imagine. Because it is a mounted red rubber stamp, I can take the black foam pad out of my Misty stamp tool and adhere that to or have it stick to the lid of my Misty. And I'm going to ink this tree up with some dark green ink from Stampin' Up. I don't remember the name of the color. I honestly don't remember the name of the color. It's some kind of meadow something or other. I don't know. It's a dark green ink. And I am going to use my cloth to slide my hand across the Misty lid to get a nice clean impression. I did get a little bit of ink on the edges of the stamp, so I cleaned that up with a baby wipe before I stamped the image down. And this tree will represent the vertical rectangle on our card sketch. For the square, I am going to use this little gift from a Lawn Fawn stamp set. And I am going to stamp it in a very light gray ink. It is Altenew Morning Glory ink. And it's really light. I don't want you to be able to see the ink because the tree is not an outline. It is a stamped image. I didn't want that present to be an outline colored in image. So I'm going to do a little bit of no line coloring here. I will stamp it in that light ink and then go ahead and color it in with some red Copic markers. Now the reds I have chosen for this gift are R89, R37, and R29. And I'm doing just a little bit of coloring. And I can see the lines on the stamp. And this package, this little gift, has a ribbon up the middle with a bow on the top. So I am using my darkest color to color the left side of the gift and the left side of the middle of the gift next to the ribbon. And I wish I had remembered to zoom in so you could see that just a little bit more. But it is what it is, right? You'll be able to see it in the pictures at the end. And I'm just going to keep coloring this in. I did edit some of it out. I should have sped it up a little bit, it looks like. But I am trying to maintain that square shape and the ribbon in the middle as well. And when I'm all done coloring it, I will go back in and recreate that ribbon and the bow on the top of the package. Because the gift is under the branch of the tree, the shadows or the darkest colors are going to be to the left. And that's kind of what I've tried to create. So I have this gold sparkle gel pen, and I am going to use that to create the ribbon on the package as well as the bow on the top. And I'm just going up and down the ribbon or on the front of the package. And then I flipped my paper over so that I didn't sit my hand in that wet jelly ink. I didn't want to smear it. And I do go over it a couple of times, giving it a couple seconds to dry in between. And I just kind of add the ribbon back to this package. And now we have 2 of the 3 elements to our card sketch. We have the vertical rectangle and this little square. For the horizontal rectangle, I am going to use one of these Simon Says Stamp sentiment strips. And I'm going to, I think I decided to use this one that says Merry Christmas to You, but it was obviously too long for the front of a portrait style card. So I am going to trim it down and just use the Merry Christmas part. I will trim it with my Fiskars trimmer. This is my precision cutting instrument. I love it. I hate it all at the same time. I can see exactly where I'm cutting. It is awesome. But you have to buy blades a lot. So that part's not awesome. The sentiment strips are stamped on, or printed on rather, a white cardstock, which means you can see those white edges as I'm trimming it down. So once I have it all trimmed down, I am going to pull out a Sharpie marker and just go around the edges of the sentiment strip and hide that white core. One cool thing with these sentiment strips is you can heat foil them with your laminator or your Mink machine, and the foil will stick to whatever part is black. This is a reverse sentiment strip where the print is in white, and then they have a regular sentiment strip where the print is in black ink on white paper. I am going to adhere this sentiment to the front of this card with my tape runner that I got from Hobby Lobby. And I'm just going to stick it right there above that gift. And then I'm going to get ready to put this panel on my card. So my card base is a piece of 110-pound white cardstock. It is 4 1/4 inches wide by 11 inches tall, and it is scored at 5 1/2. And I will go ahead and fold that over and burnish that crease with my bone folder. Clean and simple cards have 2 kind of definitions. One definition to clean and simple is simply one layer card, which is what the first one was. Another definition of clean and simple cards is any card that has a lot of white space. More white space than not. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be white. It could be black as long as it was mostly black, or purple or green or whatever. I have decided to adhere this panel to my card front with foam tape, and I am using my 3M foam tape, and I am not being stingy. There is a lot of foam tape on the back of that panel because I would hate for it to cave in and ruin the look of the card. This is my first Christmas card of the 2021 Christmas season. Every year I tell myself I'm going to start making Christmas cards in July so I don't have to hustle at the end. And every year I don't. So every year, sometime after Halloween before Thanksgiving, I spend like 2 days cranking out Christmas cards because I didn't start them early like I told myself I was going to. So here I am just turning my card base sideways and lining it up with the lines on my grid mat so that I can eyeball that into the center. Now we're going to go ahead and start the third card. This third card is not a clean and simple card. It is not the fussiest card I've ever made, but it is not a clean and simple card. I am using this hand-delivered stamp set from Stampin' Up! And a Cuttlebug embossing folder. And this is a scrap piece of Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. I don't even know exactly how big it is. It was just big enough for what I needed, which is this bouquet of balloons and the skirt end of the person holding the balloons. That's all I needed. I will stamp this with the Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink because it is Copic friendly. And I am going to be Copic coloring, that seemed like a tongue twister that shouldn't have been, this stamp set. I did end up stamping this 2 times, so I will need to make sure that the ink is very, very dry before I start coloring, or the ink will smear and bleed with my Copic markers. I am just using my cloth to get a nice, smooth, firm, I don't know what that phrase is. I lost words. Pushing it down too hard. I want to make sure I get a nice firm pressure. There we go, pressure for the stamped images. And I know that this panel is too short to have all of her legs in. I wasn't really concerned about that. I guess I could have got a bigger piece of paper, but I didn't. I just trimmed it off. No biggie. I like the stamp set. It has a couple of different bottom halves and top half images. There's balloons, there's flowers, there's gifts, there's a sign. It's a really universal stamp set. So I am going to heat set that ink and make sure that it is dry so that it does not bleed with my Copic markers. For her arms and legs, I am using E30 and E33. There's not much space in that, so I didn't feel like I needed to really pull out the 3 and 4 colors to blend it. I did put a piece of copy paper behind my cardstock to absorb any ink that went all the way through with my Copic coloring so that it didn't get onto my grid mat and soak back up through the top of the card. Okay, so for the coloring of the balloons, I have sped this up to, I think it's 4 times normal speed, and I have pulled out a rainbow of Copic colors. My red is an R39, R37, R35, and I am coloring this. I will go over each balloon twice. I am leaving a highlight at the top and putting the shadows where the other balloons touch. And for the pink color, I am using R85, R83, and R81. And on this red balloon, I went out of the lines. Normally, I would not start with red because it does tend to bleed, but I wanted to make sure I had time to clean up those edges. So now we're moving on to the pink, and this is the R85, R83, R81. And this kind of blended together almost too well. I did have to add just a little bit extra of that darker color to keep that shadow in. But it's a really pretty pink. The colors I've chosen for this rainbow are more of a muted rainbow than a bright, sunshiny spring rainbow. It's kind of like a fall rainbow, right? The yellow is a Y32, Y35, Y38 combination. And again, I'm just finding a spot near the top for the highlight and leaving the shadows where it is covered up by other balloons. For my orange balloon, I have picked out a YR02, YR04, and YR07. This is not an orange combination that I have used before. I don't know why. They're like right in a row and they make the perfect combination, the perfect color of orange for a really true orange. It's a really pretty color. Yeah, I don't know. And I did go out of the lines there a little bit, so I've pulled out my colorless blender again, and I will be pushing that back in. For the blue, I have picked a B99, B97, B95. There is quite a bit of discrepancy between the 95 and the 92, or 97 and 95. There we go. So I did have to do the tip-to-tip method to kind of fill in that gap of the color. The next one I am moving on to is like an aqua. It is a deep, dark aqua, and I'm using the BG78, BG75, and BG72. I chose the center balloon, the full balloon, to be the aqua color because I will be using an aqua colored cardstock panel through my embossing folder. And I just kind of felt like that was a good way to go matchy-matchy, right? This color combination also had a little bit of dry back. I was really surprised at how it faded into each other. It did take a couple of attempts to really get a good highlight and a good shadow. Now, normally when you color balloons, they are more translucent than opaque. And I colored these more opaque because I'm going to add some glitter to it. My green is a G16, G17, G19. And for some reason, the 17 was coloring darker than the 19, so I did have to fuss with that just a little bit. And the purple is BV. I use the blue violets, BV20, BV23, and BV25. And it kind of rounds out our rainbow of balloons there. And like I was saying, I did not go for translucent balloons because I am going to add some glitter. All balloons need glitter, right? For her dress, I am coloring her dress white, but I will put the cuff and the belt, the cuffs of the sleeves and the belt around her waist in that same color of yellow. In order to get this dress to look like it's white, not just not colored, I pulled out my cool grays. I used a C00, a C01, and a C03 to add in the shadows. On the sleeves of the dress, I used mostly that C03 because they are in shadow from the balloon. But for the rest of the dress, I just used the pleats that were already drawn in and emphasized them with the 03, blended them out with the 01 and the 00, and even a little bit of the colorless blender. So now I am going to cut this strip down to a rectangle to represent the vertical rectangle on the card sketch. Excuse me. And one thing I wanted to do was go around the edges of these balloons and use this gel pen to cover up any places that I went out of the stamp lines that didn't really hide with the blender pen. Especially the reds and the oranges and the blues are really hard to cover up with a blender pen. So now it's time to emboss our card panel. And I'm using this Cuttlebug Happy Birthday embossing folder and this piece of aqua, kind of a muted aqua cardstock. And I'm going to center it in the embossing folder there and run that through my card. Oh my goodness, my die cut machine. Words are hard today. And you can see in the camera, there's a lot of nice texture with those happy birthday words. And that will be our layer to this not clean and simple card. For my card base, I have a piece of this kind of jewel green cardstock. It is 5.5 by 8.5 inches. So I will be scoring this one at 4.25 inches, and it will be a side fold card. Yep, it's a side fold card. This was on my desk. I wanted to use this color cardstock, so I went with it. I am going to go ahead and fold that over so that I can start putting this card together. So I have this jewel green card base. I have this kind of aqua-y green mat and the balloon images. I'm going to stamp a sentiment from this stamp, and it says happy birthday. And I am just taking this little piece of white paper that I trimmed off the side, and I am stamping up the happy birthday stamp with this Simon Says stamp, intense black ink. I feel like I've said that 100 times in this video. I am just gently pushing down with the tip of my finger. I don't want to mush that into out of shape. When you adhere embossed paper to your card base, the best idea is always to use a liquid glue. I tried using a tape runner and it almost tore my paper a little bit. I've forgotten that once you've embossed your paper, sometimes it becomes quite fragile. And, you have to be careful when you're adhering it. You can see down there at the bottom, there's a little bit of a tear in it. But once I get this glued down, it looks perfect. You'll never be able to tell that it was cracked right there. So here we have our card base and our first layer. And I am going to adhere our focal image, our first rectangle. Now, I don't have anything in this card to represent that kind of square, but I figured it was kind of okay. because we're kind of sort of using that card sketch to make this super not clean and simple card. We can kind of skip that square part. And here is my sentiment strip. And I've decided I want to die cut that with these banner dies from Honeybee Stamps. And I'm going to use that third from the smallest one. And I have never used these before. I totally forgot I had them because they got stuck in the envelope with a different stamp set. And I'm going to send that through my Spellbinders die cut machine and have a pendant sentiment strip. And I will just adhere that with some liquid glue right there on the kind of bottom right-hand side of our card. So here we have our third card nearly complete. All that is left is to bling it up. Now you can have bling on a clean and simple card. Don't get me wrong. There can be glitter on clean and simple cards. But this card has way too many layers to fit that clean and simple classification. I have pulled out my Wink of Stella glitter pen and I am just glittering up these balloons. This is why I decided not to worry about adding in the shadows and making those balloons look translucent, because any balloon that had this much glitter would not be translucent anymore. It is really too bad that you cannot see that Wink of Stella on the video camera. The videos at the end, the photographs at the end of the video, you can see that glitter and it is super, super pretty. Everybody needs a little glitter. And this is my favorite way to use glitter because it does not end up all over my craft room like everything else, like regular glitter. I am going to take my white gel pen and go back through and add some more highlights in. I just wanted to kind of emphasize that there is some light bouncing off the top and front sides of those balloons. And another thing you could do that I did not do because it takes forever to dry is you could put glossy accents on these balloons and give them that really shiny texture. But as big as these balloons are, as many of them as there are, it would have taken forever and a day for that glossy accents to dry. That is a really cool thing to do with balloons. So here we are finished with our third card, and we have 3 cards with the same card sketch. We have one very clean, very simple 1-layer card on watercolor paper, so it has just enough texture to be luscious with that gold embossing. We have a clean and simple 2-layer card, has more white space than colored space, so it's a very clean card. And then we have this completely not clean or simple card. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. I hope you enjoyed this worldwide card making extra special edition video. Leave me a comment. Let me know. Do you prefer the clean and simple? Do you want them fussy and glittery? How do you create your cards? I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel. It has been so fun to make these cards for the Worldwide Card Making Day. I have linked a couple other videos here for you to watch. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I would be happy and excited if you did. Thanks so much. Bye.